Hello and welcome to a live episode of Pop Culture on Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. I'm your host, Keri, and I'm here with my co host, Mystery Chris, who's still decked out in his Halloween avatar because we're still doing a spooky pop culture.
Yay! Halloween never
Yay.
ends.
You want it to end, don't you? I love. I could have Halloween straight to Christmas.
I have a conspiracy theory that the people who make the pumpkins, they want you to buy a pumpkin for Halloween, carve it up, then you got to buy another pumpkin for Thanksgiving. But I say reverse it. Buy a pumpkin for October for Halloween, and then carve it for Thanksgiving.
Why?
So you don't have to buy one instead of two.
What? You could
Yes.
just when you carve it up for Halloween, couldn't you save all the guts and use them later?
Ew.
Well, welcome. We also have special guest Tracy from Keto and Crime returning tonight because we promised you guys we were going to do a part 2 of True Crime, and we have Tracy. Hello, Tracy. How are you?
I'm good. How are y'all?
I'm good. Did you have a good Halloween?
I did. It was pretty quiet. We didn't get really any trick-or-treaters at all, but that was fine.
Oh,
We just sat and watched horror movies. It was a good night.
I
What
don't
did
think a lot of kids trick or treat anymore. Is that? That's what my perspective is. I tend to not see a lot of trick or treaters around me or my parents' house or other people's house. It's like people are afraid to like take their kids around, so people do the trunk or treats now.
Yeah.
Oh, I've heard
Our
of the trunk
churches
or
do.
treats.
Yeah, our churches around here do a lot of trunk or treats, but our neighborhood, I mean, I'm way out in the boonies, so it's really not. It's we're not on anybody's Halloween route unless they specifically come to see us. So.
Well, I can't answer that anecdotally because I'm for the first time in my life since I was a kid living in a small town that gets a lot of trick or treaters. So this was our second year in this old house for Halloween, and it was great. There were tons of kids who came by, and I love it. It's such a simple joy, right? But it's like, oh, all the kids come. It's like reminds you of when you were younger. They're all in costume. Everyone's having a good time. I heard these two middle school maybe age boys walking by, and then one of them was like, "I love Halloween," and they're just everybody was having a good time. And we got to meet some more of our neighbors, and yeah, I loved it. My only thing is, my husband has a very he's much more organized than me, and he also is very practical, which is a good thing. And we're good yin and yang. So he has calculated the right amount of candy to put in there. Like he's like, last year you let them just reach in there and take whatever they wanted. And that's why we ran out of candy and had to go to the store. So you have to give them, and here's how much to give them. And he had it calculated, but I did what he said. I was doling out the candy, but I was still giving way too much. I was just like handfuls. And then he asked me, cause he's like, how much are you giving? I was like, I don't know. I'm just grabbing candy. And like that's why we're running out. We ran out again. So we had to. My poor husband. He made a candy run in the middle. He's wonderful. So yeah. Next year, I was
Then
like,
you have to start giving out pennies and apples.
I seriously, while he was gone, which didn't take that long, but there were several groups that came by, and I was just saying, "Look, we're out." I showed them the empty bowl. I'm like, "We're gonna have some more in a minute." I seriously was considering giving them tangerines. Like,
That one house that gives out toothbrushes.
yes, exactly. Or canned. I was like, what canned goods do we have? Canned peas? Would you like some canned peas? Which is funny because I think we already think of us as the haunted house a little bit. So that would have been funny if we were the weirdos giving out canned goods. Yeah. There was some kids afraid to come up, like their parents had to encourage them to come closer to our house.
I was talking to my grandmother, And she's going, "Oh, the world's so crazy these days. People putting razor blades and apples." I'm like, "Grandma, that's an urban legend." She's like, "No,
That
no, it's
never
true."
happened.
I'm like, "All right, I'll let you have this one, Grandma."
My grandma believed that too. She told us all the time. A lot of grandmas believe that.
It's like,
The
how,
only
how
time
even
that
if someone,
happened was some jerk targeting his own children. That's the
yeah, I
only
think I
time
heard
that
that. It's only
happened.
Yeah.
once. That was like a long time ago. But how would you
I did
not
a
even
video on
know
it.
like there's a razor blade inserted into an apple? Like, you tell me the person like filled it in with like clay or something and then painted
Yeah.
it. Like, you can look at the apple and tell something's been
How would you
inserted.
get it into anything? You'd have to like be able to like melt the chocolate over a Snickers bar and put it back into place and somehow reseal the wrapper. I mean, come
Mm-hmm.
on.
It's a lot of work.
My husband, Anthony Garcia Music, is here watching at the gym. He says 2 Tootsie Rolls and 1 mini candy bar per kid. That's it.
I judge you for Tootsie Rolls. I would have rolled your yard had I come trick or treating and you gave me Tootsie Rolls.
Tootsie Rolls. That was at the bottom. That was like on the second. We didn't have Tootsie Rolls at the beginning. That's what we had to do with candy. What's left? You know, Tootsie Rolls are left.
Did you see that video that's circulating on social media of some people who left out a bucket of candy? It was like a self-serve type of thing. And this family of pretty much all women, I think like maybe one teenage kid and some little kids came up and just started grabbing all the candy, like every little bit. And they went back to look to see if there's any more. And it's like, people are horrible. All for some damn candy.
Yeah, I actually have that queued up. Do you want to see it, Tracy?
Yeah.
If you
Makes me
guys,
angry, actually.
I know.
I
If you
would've-
guys, here now, look at the on the left. On the left, that's definitely got to be a mom.
Yeah.
Just,
Here we go.
These kids are gonna grow up so screwed up.
Oh my god.
It's a good tourism video. Look at him! Look at him!
Yeah.
Adam says socialist.
If this doesn't represent America as a whole, I don't know what else does.
Ah.
Come on, get it! Everybody can come on here.
It's pretty. We had such a great Halloween with people coming by and doing the trick or treating thing that when I saw this, I was like, man, why you gotta make me hate on people again? People.
I gotta still hope that these people are very, very much in the minority.
Yeah, I hope so. There was a follow video. Some guy came up and like dumped in a bunch of new candy, like a neighbor or somebody who saw it. And I was like, well, that was nice of him.
That I want to see that video because that would restore my faith in humanity that someone replaced the candy. Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about this. It should be obvious. It's bad parenting. Those kids don't have anyone teaching them restraint. I mean, that's the parents' fault. Although it reminds me of, did you ever see when Ellen on the Ellen her daytime talk show, she did a hidden video where I guess for different audience members she would put out gifts like freebies, and there was a table and it said take one, which like this candy thing, it supposedly there was a sign that said take one. So she would put out like little stuffed animals and socks and whatever, and it said take one gift, or like a thermos that said the Ellen Show. It was different branded Ellen Show stuff. Did you guys ever see that video?
I did, and then there was a couple of people that took more than one item, and she called them on it.
Yes, there were a couple of adults who were there standing at the table and like looking around and then like taking several of the items, just like this. And yes, she embarrassed them in front of the studio audience. She played it while they were in the audience. Pretty crazy. I've heard stories about how Ellen is terrible, but
yeah, I was about to say there are videos of her stealing stuff too.
Maybe that's why she knew they were going to do it. But in that case, I thought, good on you, Ellen. Like,
what if it was like a tryout for people to hire on her show?
Right. Yeah. LOL. Good for Ellen. Yeah. Okay. So tonight, our first true crime episode, if you missed it, it was a banger, and it was probably our first ever 3+ hours episode. It went on, and I don't know about you, Tracy and Chris, but I was enjoying it. And there was so much to show that I didn't even realize it had been 3 hours. So we barely scratched the surface in that episode. If you haven't seen it yet, you can find it here in the Deprogrammed archives. It was from 2 weeks ago, and we mostly just covered the women, some of the high profile cases in true crime, and covered a lot of the women. So tonight we're going to talk about some of the men, and there's some women thrown in here as well, but mostly men. And I just wanted to start off by saying, if you haven't seen that video, we did show at the beginning, we went through some statistics and some studies that answered or attempted to answer the question, do women watch more true crime than men? Which they do. It's not just something you think amongst you and your friends. Studies show women consume a lot more true crime in the form of books, made for TV movies about actual crime cases, and then of course watching shows like Cold Case Files, things like that. Women watch a lot more of that, and so we kind of at the beginning of that episode went over some of the reasons why. Does anybody want to summarize what we kind of the conclusions we came to about why that might be?
As I recall, we kind of came to the conclusion that it's very divided, that women tend to gravitate toward the murders and kidnappings, things of that nature, and that we're more, at least from my experience, and the women that watch my channel were more interested in why people end up the way that they do. And with men, it can be more, men tend to gravitate more toward white collar crime. And then it's more the technical means, logistics of how someone would get away with it or how they did that.
And you see that in the analytics on your YouTube channel, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's fascinating. Yeah, it said men would tend to watch true crime, I guess, using that term loosely, if it was about war or gangs or something on a large scale. Mm-hmm. Or white collar crime, whereas women tend towards, these individual psychopath killers.
Right. And I also did a video. My last video was on the woman that cheated in both the New York City and Boston Marathon back in the 80s, and no one was interested in that. But I found it interesting.
You're like, I found one that no
one cares about.
In the Venn diagram of true crime. That's like a little outlier way.
Cheating. No one.
Sports cheating. Well, I'm like I said in the last episode, I'm definitely in that boat. I align to the average. It's on average that women tend to consume more true crime. Obviously not every woman, but squarely in among the average, because it is my go-to thing to watch, to wind down, to relax, to if I want to watch something interesting. And so tonight we're going to talk about some of the ones that everyone knows about, maybe some that you don't know about, and some that I find interesting. Should we start with the one that you've done a lot of research on, the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to give you the Cliff's Notes of that one. So basically, we have Lori Vallow. She was born in California, raised in California, into a Mormon family. She had two sisters and a brother. Her maiden name was Cox, Cox. She basically had a hard run of it with men. She had a couple of kids out of wedlock, and finally got married and to her second husband, and basically thought she had found the American dream. Well, that whole relationship broke down, and so from there she kind of spiraled into ultra religiosity, particularly with the LDS Church. She began being very obsessed with the end of the world predictions, and ended up remarrying her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. who was also Mormon, and they lived in Arizona. He did very well. They moved to Hawaii for a while and ran a shaved ice business, and then eventually moved back to Arizona. And from the period of 2017 to 2018, she went to a Vow is a network within Mormon circles that is kind of a prepper network. Now, LDS Church is very big on prepping for the end of the world. They have a very literal interpretation of the end of the world. Like you need to bullets, food, become independent. I see Cheeky's question down there. Joseph Ryan, who was the father of her middle child, Ty Lee, he actually died in between the third and the fourth. And so anyway, so it was very, bombs, bullets, all that. And she met Chad Daybell, who is a gravedigger and author, and I'm not being facetious. He served as chief gravedigger for several cemeteries in Utah. And he's also very big in LDS circles as a fiction writer, and all of his novels revolve around the end of the world. I've read them all, and there's some messed up stuff. I'll be happy to clue you in on all of that. But she got pretty fascinated, met him, became fascinated with him. They began having an affair.
And at that point, she was married when she met Chad Daybell.
Correct.
He was married with kids, and she was married to number 3, right? Charles
Vallow, yes.
Okay.
And he was married to Tammy Daybell. They had been married almost 30 years and had 4 children. And Tammy supported him. They had their own publishing company called Spring Hill Publishing, and they self-published all of his books. They had some other authors that were all LDS faith type authors that worked for them. Julie Rowe is one. There's a couple of others, and she's a dingbat too. But in any case, they basically, he had his own brand of Mormonism. He had this light and dark scale that he could magically tell who was light and who was dark. And basically, if you were dark, you had been possessed by a demon and you were no longer human, and you were, on the dark scale. And if you were light, you were angelic. And they both kind of considered themselves some kind of seeker in the realm of the 144,000, that they're going to prepare the way for Christ. And basically everybody that they wanted removed conveniently, that was giving them trouble, and from her ex-husband to her 2 youngest children, and Tammy's and his own wife became dark and had to be eliminated.
Yes. So he would basically say he could tell that if a person became dark, and they would call them zombies, right?
Correct.
Like and at some point he decided, or they together decided, that her 2 youngest children,
JJ and Tylee.
So they were having an affair, and then she starts acting erratically, and her husband that she was married to while she's having this affair, Charles Vallow, didn't he have to report her to the police?
He did several times. He went to the police in Chandler, Arizona, scared. He had been locked out of his house. She was threatening him. He eventually left her and moved to Houston. And he found all the emails between her and Chad and saw that she was having the affair. And he moved his life insurance from her and their son. Like JJ, their youngest, was the grandson of his sister, the Woodcocks. And so they adopted him because the parents could not care for him. He was an autistic child. And so he moved the life insurance beneficiary from Lori to now his sister, Kay Woodcocks, who's the grandfather of JJ, or the grandmother of JJ. And basically, Lori's brother, Alex, who was very much caught up in this cult-like atmosphere, was kind of her avenger. He had attempted to kill Joseph Ryan, her 3rd husband, at one point, did not succeed. And he ended up killing Charles in self-defense. in Chandler in 2018, and then they believe.
Let's pause it for a second. I'm going to say self-defense in quotes.
Yeah, that's
That's how
self-defense.
it was ruled at the time. But the police were called, and he said that, it was basically his word versus her dead estranged husband's
Husband
word. But so he was the only word, and he said, well, he charged at me
with a baseball
with a
bat
baseball bat, and so I had to shoot him and kill him.
in the back of the head.
In the back of the head, yeah. And they originally just let this go and said, I guess it must
Or
be
in the chest,
self-defense.
excuse me. It wasn't in the back of the head, it was a chest.
Okay.
It was in his chest. Alex did have a small mark on the back of his head. That's where I got back of the head from the bat, but it wasn't enough to really, they couldn't even prove it was the bat, really. It was just a mark on the back of his head.
And I saw the video footage. Now this one, I scoured the web for it and I can't find it. Maybe you know somewhere where it's at, Tracy, but this, I did not imagine seeing this. Where, remember that one clip in the last one? I was like, did we ever see that, or was it just described? This, I know I saw this, and I can't find it anymore. But it was there was footage on the police officer who responded right after Lori Daybell's brother, Alex Cox, killed her husband, Charles Vallow, and there's body cam footage from the cop. And Lori shows up with her daughter, Tylee, and her affect is completely off.
Yep.
She's flirting and joking and smiling, doing the
And
charm.
saying, well, we just moved here to this new rental house. What a way, hello neighbors, here we are. Just very jovial.
Very joking, while they're like, your brother just killed your husband, and she's just like, oh, we just moved here. Like, how are you? It's so bizarre. And they still ruled it. Okay, must be self-defense.
Yeah.
Okay. I just had to cut him because that's such a crazy murder that just happened. Yeah. And they just let it go.
Yeah, exactly. And now they've reopened the case, and she's about to be extradited from Idaho to Arizona to face charges in Charles Vallow's death.
Yes. Okay, and so then, after that, so Charles Vallow, I got you distracted. So Charles Vallow, her husband, is killed by her brother in supposed self-defense, and then what happens?
And then basically from there, she and Chad are married in Hawaii.
Wait, real quick. But before they get married, his wife, what happens to his wife?
All right, well, two things happen. Basically, Lori has a niece named Melanie who was married to her ex-husband. He was not too keen on his wife's involvement with them either. So he was very wealthy, still very, Brandon Boudreaux's his name, very wealthy young man, hard worker. He was shot at with what people described as a paintball gun, but it turned out to be a real gun. Broke a window in his car one morning. So somebody took a pot shot at him. And then later on, it was connected that it was Alex Cox driving Charles, who's already dead, Jeep that Tylee drove. So,
and shot at Melanie's boyfriend or husband.
Melanie's ex-husband.
Okay.
Because he had gotten custody of their children from Melanie because she had gone off the deep end and followed Lori and Chad and Alex to Idaho. They all moved into the same, Chad did not. He had his own little farm out in Idaho, but Lori, Alex, and Melanie had all moved into 3 different townhouses in the same apartment complex. And
like
so
a cult.
Yeah, like a cult. He did not want his children around that, and so somebody made an attempt on his life.
Yeah.
And then he went immediately to the police. He was not backing down. He still got custody of those children. And so this is 2019. And then Tammy Daybell in October of 2019 woke up dead. No, and it was ruled no autopsy was performed by virtue of Chad. He called the police, came there, said that she had been experiencing some heart issues and had some pain and just died in the middle of the night. She was found kind of half on, half off the bed with some pink foam coming out of her mouth, which can be, as we will later find out, is a symptom of being asphyxiated. And she's gone. No autopsy. They never questioned it. I really question sometimes law enforcement in Arizona and Idaho. And so basically, she's gone, and
So
now
now
they're
his
married.
wife's out of the way. So first Lori's husband is killed in so-called self-defense by her brother, and then Chad's wife mysteriously dies, and
Right.
at the time they don't suspect any foul play.
Correct. And then not that just a couple of months after that, Tylee and JJ come up missing. And basically, and Tammy and Chad take off to Hawaii and are married there while her kids are missing. Idaho, and by virtue of Kay Woodcox, the grandparents of JJ, the Woodcox, asked for a welfare check. So Idaho basically commissions Kauai police, and they tell them that if they do not produce the children for a welfare check, they will be taken into custody. They did not produce them. They just ignored the police totally. And they're arrested in Kauai, extradited. Well, she is, and extradited back to Idaho. Chad follows her back, and eventually they find the remains of Tylee and JJ buried in on Daybell's property. And in the meantime, Alex Cox dies of a blood clots in the lungs. Conveniently,
The brother
who
did all the crime committing for her, a lot of it.
He shot at Brandon Boudreaux. He's the one that shot Charles Vallow. And by virtue of the trial, which I did cover, you can find all that on my channel. Basically, his GPS, his cell phone linked him to Tylee and JJ just before their deaths, and to the burial of Tylee and JJ on the Daybell property. And I suspect that he was probably murdered too, but because he was cremated, we'll never know.
So there's a couple things. This case is so convoluted. I saw somebody in the chat. I'm sorry, I forget who, because it was I was scrolling away, but somebody said they don't watch fiction anymore. This case, I don't know if that was related to this case or not, but this case is one of those that's like, reality is so much stranger than fiction. I think if somebody wrote this as a plot, it would be so convoluted that people would say, "Oh, it wasn't plausible." Like, there's too many murders and there's too many, people involved, and just to trace it all back and everything that happened. It's insane. And this woman, remember, while her kids were missing, which authorities only knew about because, as you mentioned, the grandparents were calling, trying to get a hold of JJ.
Right.
And, it's not like this mom said, "Oh, my kids are missing. They've been kidnapped or something. Let me go to the police." This reminds me a lot of the Casey Anthony one.
Oh, they're safe. That's what she kept telling everybody. They're safe. She even lied on another friend of hers, another Melanie. I don't think she's innocent either. That basically tried to stronghold her, who she was also in the middle of all this Avow cult, into the world stuff. They had a podcast together. Tried to convince her to lie to the Idaho police when they called, when they were going to call her to say that JJ was with her, and she refused to lie.
Yeah, so she told the police, Lori, that JJ, her son, was with this friend Melanie, and then
in Arizona, right.
in Arizona, and then this is a phone call that Melanie secretly recorded with them, where they're trying to, as you said, convince her to lie about it.
Correct.
Be careful with this channel. This
channel.
Yeah, I've seen other channels cover stuff that he's posted, and sometimes they'll try to take it down.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, I remember was it the Rittenhouse trial? I know Rekieta and some of the other lawyers were taking streams from Law and Crime, and Law and Crime was taking their stuff down. So I don't know how they feel about showing smaller clips, but I know with the Rittenhouse stuff, they weren't happy about that.
Wow. Okay. What about Court TV?
I think I don't know about Court TV.
I've used Court TV and never had any issues.
Okay, let me see. Let's try this one then.
And those are the Woodcocks behind Chad there.
Oh, sweet. How are you?
Grandparents.
Hi, Chad. Hey, Lori.
Wait, who's that behind Chad?
Those are the grandparents.
Oh,
The Woodcocks. Those are JJ's grandparents.
Hey, let me put on speaker.
Oh, okay.
All right.
We're enough with the phone. How are you guys?
We're okay. How are you doing, babe?
I'm doing pretty good, thanks. I was wondering, where are you guys?
We're just hanging out.
Hanging out? Are you in Idaho?
We're near Idaho.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to ask you a question, if you don't.
by the way, how vague. Hey, how are you guys? We're good. Where are you in Idaho? No. Anyway, can we ask you a question? So vague.
Mind, Lori?
Yeah, of course, honey.
I want to know, you remember we talked about JJ going to Kay's house, and you told me they went there, and now he's not there? I was wondering what happened.
Well, I had to move him somewhere else because of her actions. So,
Was she doing something? Like, was she trying to come get him or something? Or, like, trying to kidnap him?
well, she said that lots of times before, but,
Okay. When I asked Chad the other day, I was like, hey, where is JJ? And he said, for my security, he didn't want me to know. So is there a reason I should be in danger to know where he is?
no, it's nobody. It's his danger. It's the danger that there's people after me.
Okay.
We just felt that if you knew, that puts you in a danger.
Well, just in a bad position.
Yeah, bad position.
Everybody, if they don't know anything, then they don't have to say they know.
Right. So you're just worried. Okay.
I'm just to keep him protected and
keep you protected.
and keep everybody else good.
I appreciate that.
So just so we're clear, this is Lori and Chad, Tracy saying we can't tell you where JJ actually is because we're worried about your safety.
Correct. And they're alluding. They've alluded on several different phone calls that that the Woodcocks were trying to take JJ, and that just anybody associated with Chad wasn't safe because Satan was out to get him. Just all kinds of stuff. And basically, what they determined from all the evidence, autopsies, everything that they did, is that all of these people died of asphyxiation.
All of them.
All of them.
I have a question for you from Hey Two Sisters and Some Yarn. She says, Tracy, am I imagining that JJ's grandparents are from Louisiana? I can't recall that, or I recall that.
Yes, they are from Louisiana.
Yeah. Should we play more of this phone call, or should we move along? I just think it's fascinating to hear people lie. I mean, but I may be the only one who wants to listen to this. Yeah.
Whatever you want to do. It's your
Let's hear
straight
just
night.
a little bit more of the delusion, and then we won't play because this is a 21-minute phone call. We can't play the whole thing. Okay.
Well, I was wondering why you told the police why he was with me.
I just needed to have somebody so I wouldn't have to tell them where he really was because they were going to tell Kay where he is.
Oh, yeah. So do you think it's like your family, or like your family, your dad, or those people?
Family. Well, not my whole family, but as you know, most of my family is working against me and with her, basically.
Yeah.
Kay is the grandma, right?
Correct.
It's so funny. It's like even the way the friend asked that with trepidation, like, just wondering, why did you tell the police though that he was with me?
Is JJ safe?
He is safe and happy.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. are you afraid of anything? Like, are you afraid to tell me that you're just afraid that that I could be in danger? Like like I don't, like if I knew, like how could that hurt me? I don't understand how that could hurt me if I knew where he was.
Well, I'm just not telling anybody so that nobody has to say where he is or get questioned to where he is, so I can keep him as safe as possible.
Yeah. Okay, I hope that he's okay. I hope you guys are okay. I did have a question that I asked Al at one point, your brother, if I wanted to know, like where he was, and he said I did not want to know, and that he could not be found. So what does that mean?
I don't know why he would say that, but it's the same story. Like I don't even want Al to know. I don't want anybody to know, so that nobody has to be worried about it. I mean, nobody has to be.
And what she said there is key, because when she read her statement at her sentencing hearing, when she said that when they asked, when she talked about JJ.
This is me now at 43.
Ooh.
Sorry.
No, I'm not complaining. Being safe. She was referring to them safe beyond the veil, that they were out of pain, out of all the misery they were in, because they were safe beyond the veil.
Yeah, it's so in Chad's mind and in Lori's mind, he was something of a prophet. Is that right?
Correct. Definitely a prophet, and his writings reflect that. Everything from his autobiography to his fiction books, they're all about him having near-death experiences and seeing heaven and getting a tour of heaven and seeing all these wonderful things that he's supposed to help usher in the second coming of Christ.
By the end of that phone call, like I said, we're not going to listen to the whole thing. It's 21 minutes, but you also hear them get kind of irritated with her.
Yeah.
Just the absolute gall of in my opinion, two people who are narcissistic, sociopathic, but just the absolute gall of, you've murdered your children, your husband, your wife, so you can be together. And then to sit there on the phone with maybe one of your only closest friends and lie to them with just and not just lie to them, but have the gall to get angry and upset. Like, why don't you trust me?
Yeah. Well, later on that phone, they'll talk about how she's been listening to David. That is David Warwick. That is Melanie Gibbs. They're still married. I don't know if they're together. But Melanie Gibbs is an interesting creature, too. I've read her book as well. All these people write books, which is really weird. But about how he's influencing her and blah, blah. But basically, I think there was a power struggle in the cult going on between Chad and David. And they were now, because Melanie wasn't just absolutely doing whatever they wanted her to do, they were now saying that David was being a bad influence on her. Not that David was a good influence. He's just as Looney Tunes as Chad, but a less violent one, as it would be. Everybody would be alive if David were in charge of that mess.
Do you remember back when the kids were missing and before they had found their bodies at Chad's farm, when they were missing, and as you mentioned, they went to Hawaii and had this wedding, and do you remember all the news coverage in real time as this was happening?
I do. It was kind of colliding with the Love Is One cult, which was also all over the news at that time. The cult that had committed some murders out west, and so it was all. And I do remember that the main thing was just how callous Lori was. I mean, it was that same happy-go-lucky thing that you saw with the body cam footage after her husband died, of them just basically not having a care in the world, running through with all the money they got from Charles' death. The emails revealed in court showed how absolute, and Tammy's life insurance as well, Tammy Daybell's life insurance. But it showed how angry Lori was. A lot of emails surfaced about when she found out Charles had removed her from the life insurance and left it all to the Woodcocks. So she was very angry. And part of the charges on her was that she continued to take both Tylee and JJ Social Security benefits after they had so part of what's on her is financial crime. So she just wanted whatever would line her pockets.
Just incredible.
Yeah.
This is them. This is some of that when they were found in Hawaii and they were just taking their sweet time, and the police had given them an ultimatum, like, you tell us where the kids are by such and such date or you're going to be arrested. And they just, this is them.
More details are emerging about Lori Vallow Daybell, the mother of 2 children who have been missing for almost 5 months. Rich Robertson is a private investigator hired by Brandon Boudreaux, the ex-husband of Lori's niece, Melanie.
He told me
That's the one that was shot at.
whole tale of killing and missing people and his religious cults, and that he'd been the victim of a drive-by shooting.
Robertson says Brandon believes Lori's brother, Alex Cox, is the man who shot at him. A few weeks later, Robertson says he took these photos of Melanie and Cox packing up her house in Arizona to move to Rexburg, Idaho, and leaving some of Melanie's children's things behind. Cox.
I wanted to get, I guess this is going more into Brandon. I thought this was going to be one about them in Hawaii, but the way that they were just ignoring the press when the press was trying to talk with them in Hawaii, just again, I find this kind of stuff fascinating. And somebody in the chat said it's utterly, Adam says, destitute of a conscience. Yeah, it's utterly without remorse or shame. You know, there's photos of them, like we put one of the pictures up of them at their wedding on the beach, and they're just having a grand old time, like very romantic.
And the kids are dead. They know the kids are dead.
They know the kids are dead. Yeah. This is the love of my life kind of photo shoot after having done what they just did. It blows the mind. I think this is the essential, this gets back to the essential reason why women watch true crime, is just trying to understand and fathom something like that. That's impossible probably to comprehend.
Yeah. And so that's Lori was found guilty on all charges. She's facing 4 life sentences in Idaho, and she's going to be extradited to Arizona to face charges in both Charles's death and Brandon's attempted murder.
That's great. Because sometimes
Chad's trial's in April, unless he pleads it out before then.
Yeah. I'm just grateful that they found her guilty on all these counts, because after having covered the Casey Anthony one in the last video and having that stuck in my mind, and just, you know, the anger about that one and somebody who, you know, is just absolutely guilty getting away with it. That sucks. So,
well, his books, his fiction books, there's 2 or 3 different series. Most of them are, it's obviously, there's characters, it's obviously a stand-in for him. And in all his books, his character is like the most grandiose of all, like just below Jesus and Joseph Smith. So he definitely had an inflated ego. Now, who is the culprit here? I don't know. I think Lori's just as twisted as he is, but I think maybe she would have just remained a crazy religious zealot. You know, but she did love her kids at one point. So I think she just would have remained that crazy religious mom, you know, that was into prepping, but her kids would have remained alive had she never met him. I think he was the linchpin that kind of brought all that down.
it's so weird how sometimes when you see a parent do the unthinkable like that, there's some new romantic interest involved. I know in the last episode when we talked about Susan Smith, who killed her children, drowned her children, Diane Downs, who shot at her kids, killed one of her kids, because there was a new man that they were interested in. And in this case, I think that it's got some elements of that. You know, she meets this guy, and then it suddenly, you know, starts engaging in all this stuff. Not that it's his fault. I'm just saying it brought that out of her.
Oh yeah, but strangely enough, all 4 of his children are still alive, but they were grown, so they were not in their hair, so to speak, like her kids were. And Tylee, the girl, she was a spitfire. I mean, she was not easily controlled, and I think that's one reason they wanted her out of the way. And then JJ, being autistic and being young. I think they just saw him as a burden. But my
Yeah.
whole thing is just give him to his grandparents. They wanted him. They would have taken him. But there was that financial incentive of continuing to draw Social Security benefits because Tylee's father, natural father, was dead. She was drawing his Social Security, and JJ had benefits because he was autistic. And then after Charles died, he got those benefits as well. And she was drawing spouse's benefits from Charles as well. So
I'm always surprised when I hear that it's women who kill their kids when they enter like a new relationship, because a lot of times it's men who kill the kids, and
Yeah.
that's similar to what lions do in the wild. If a lion wants to mate with a female lion, oftentimes they'll kill the cubs, so she starts to go into heat and won't want to mate. And so humans, I think men in general, tend to do that in those type of cases where they kill the kids.
most family annihilators, I mean, there's family annihilators, women too. I would consider Lori Vallow a family annihilator. They just take out their whole family, but the vast majority of them are male. And you see those elements that Mystery Chris was just talking about. Chris Watts, there was that element was there. Whatever your opinion is on Lacey, on the Peterson case, those elements are there. All of them have some, usually an affair, usually with family annihilators, particularly men, it's either for an outside romantic interest, or they feel their family has disappointed them in some way, or is an embarrassment to them, or they feel their family is holding them back. It's always one of those three elements. Like with Chris Watts, it was definitely, I think he thought his family was holding him back, and there was a romantic interest.
He was having an affair.
Yeah, Chris Coleman the same way, Jeffrey McDonald the same way. The only one that fits into anything else would be John List, and that's the one that happened in the late 70s, and he actually remained at large for over 12 years. It was America's Most Wanted that brought him in. He felt his family, he was a very religious man, and felt that his family was an embarrassment to him. So he was one of the few on the other side.
Wow. Well, speaking of family annihilators, and you mentioned Chris Watts, I've got this video pulled up of him. This was another recent one. This one was also all over the news and was unfolding in real time. People were following it. And much like the Scott Peterson case, I think people were very concerned because his wife was pregnant, like in the Scott Peterson case. He had 2 toddlers who were also missing. And he started doing, like Scott Peterson, these news interviews where he was pleading for anyone who may have taken his wife and kids, his pregnant wife and kids, to bring them home. And so some people's heart were going out to this guy, whereas others were saying that guy looks super fishy. This is one of his TV interviews. And knowing what we know about this guy, that he did annihilate his family, just watch some of his mannerisms and his body language in this interview.
Chris Watts, WATTS.
What's going on right now around your house?
Right now, you got K9 units, the sheriff's department. Everybody's like they're doing their best right now to figure out like if they can get a scent, see where they went. If they went on foot, they went in a car, or they went somewhere. And right now, it's just like they've been on point. They're going through the house trying to get a scent, and hopefully they can pick something up to where it's going to lead to something.
What happened? Your wife came home. Tell me what's.
She came home from the airport 2 a.m. and I left around 5:15. She was still here, and like about 12:10 in that afternoon, her friend Nicole showed up at the door. Like I had texted Shanann a few times that day, called her, say but she never got back to me. But she wasn't getting back to any of her people as well, and that's what really concerned a lot of people. Is like she's not getting back to her. Like if she doesn't get back to me, that's fine. Like she gets busy during the day, but she didn't get back to her people, which was very concerning. And
okay, so first of all, right off the bat, this is a TV interview, and you just found out your wife and 2 kids are missing. And again, this is one of those cases where I think you see a liar who's just giving way too many details because they want their story to be believed.
Yep.
And you're not being interrogated by the police right here. You're talking to the news. I think the normal reaction, if your story was true, would be like, I don't know what happened. My wife is missing. She's not answering calls. If anybody's seen her, boom, you go right into the plea for bring my wife back. But he's like, at around 5:15, I was doing this. And then her friend Nicole, he's like getting the timeline out, it's just such a red flag. I think that's the other reason women maybe watch this stuff is they're like, I want to know if someone's ever pulling the wool over my eyes like this, you know?
Yeah. Same thing with Chris Coleman. He was laying out the timeline. He made sure he sent certain texts and made certain calls at certain times because he was laying out an alibi. That's just a dead giveaway.
Yeah, and sometimes you hear these guilty people do it even in the 911 call. Yep. They're in the 911 call, and instead of just saying, my wife's not breathing or what have you, they're like, this happened, I think my wife this, I think, you know, and they're going into all this detail because they're trying to get the story out. Like, please believe me and believe my story.
Nicole called me when she was at the door, and that's when I came home. And then walked in the house, and nothing was vanished. Nothing was here. I mean, she wasn't here. The kids weren't here. Nobody was here.
What's your wife's name?
Shanann. Shanann.
What's your kids?
Bella and Celeste.
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 How old are your daughters?
4, and Bella's 4, Celeste is 3.
And so, how many times did you try calling her?
I called her 3 times, texted her about 3 times just to say, you know, what's going on. Like because after the.
Okay, one quick comment. SC DeGrand says, I talk like that all the time, and I've never killed anyone. I don't mean all the time. I mean right after you just found out something awful and traumatic like this. Awful and traumatic like this, most people aren't going through a card catalog of this happened, like with all these minute details. Usually. But there's no right way to respond. I get that. I guess, you know, there always needs to be that caveat, but
I don't think I could give an interview if my wife was missing.
Yeah.
That would be up to the law enforcement to make the announcement and ask for tips. I don't think I could do it.
Yeah. He's just so chill, and at 5:45, like.
Yeah.
After I called her and texted her once, it's like maybe she was just busy. Like she had just gotten back, you know, like everybody's probably calling her from her trip. She just got back from Arizona, and I figured she was just busy. But when her friend showed up, that's what it was like. It registered like, all right, this isn't right.
Do you think she just took off? Do you think?
I mean, right now I don't even want to just like throw anything out there. Like, I hope that she's somewhere safe right now and with the kids. But I mean, could she just taken off? I don't know. But if somebody has her and they're not safe, like I want them back now. Like that's what's in my head. Like if they're safe right now, they're gonna come back. But if they're not safe right now, that's the not knowing part. Like if they're not safe, last night I had every light in the house on. I was hoping that I would just ran over by the kids running in the door and just like barrel rushing me, but it didn't happen. And it was just a traumatic night trying to be here.
I'm gonna ask some kind of tough questions about the relationship with the kids.
Yeah, my kids are my life. I mean, those smiles light up my life. And this, like, I mean, last night, like during when they usually eat dinner, it was just like I miss them. Like, I mean, I miss telling them, hey, you got to eat that, or you're not gonna get your dessert, you know, and just like you're not gonna get your snack after. I miss that. Like, I miss them, you know, cuddle up on their couches. They have like a Minnie Mouse couch and a Sophia couch that they cuddle up on and watch, you know, Bubble Guppies or something. And it was just like, you know, it was tearing me apart last night, and I needed that. I needed that last night, and for nobody to be here last night and to go into their rooms and know that I wasn't going to turn the rain machines on. I know that I wasn't going to turn their monitor on. No, I wasn't going to kiss them to bed tonight. It was. You
suffocated them and dropped them in a vat of oil.
I couldn't.
Right. Like, do you think that's going through his head at all while he's doing this, talking with someone like this? Do you think there's any kind of, or is it a pushing down of what he did, like not wanting to think about it?
I think he's pushing it down. I don't think he's a psychopath or a sociopath. There's definitely something wrong with him. I think he and Shanann were having a lot of financial problems, and I, from my research on this case, I don't think Shanann was an easy woman to live with. I'm not.
No, me either.
I don't think I could have put up with her. I think I would have left her. I wouldn't have killed her, but I think it was some sort of argument. It went bad. I think he killed her in a rage, and then just decided that he just needed to. I think he just decided that he just needed to be rid of all of it, and in that moment, he made snap decisions, and he did the worst thing you could ever do. I don't think he calculated it. I think when they got into a fight, I think it got very heated, and it just happened.
I look, I'm with
This
you.
guy's a beta. But when when he goes off the chain, they can be more dangerous than an alpha on the rampage.
I think if anything, so this is just me off the cuff. People are going to be like, "Oh, she's irresponsible making this judgment with base." But this is what I would say to you if my friend and we were hanging out. From watching all the video footage, his wife Shanann was very online. She was selling a product called Thrive, which is it's from Lavelle, and it's sort of like Herbalife. It's one of these MLM companies that, you know, where they have shakes and patches. It's about getting fit and losing weight and being healthy. And her whole life was marketing Thrive, and she often would include him and the kids in her videos. It kind of reminded me of Jada Pinkett Smith bringing Will Smith into the camera when he didn't want to be on camera. Just even when she told him she was pregnant, she staged it and set up a camera to get the reaction. She would text him when they're on vacation. She would text him to make sure that when she and the daughters came down the escalator at the airport, that he had the camera ready to get capture the footage. Like everything.
Yeah.
Was
she monitored their bank account. If he made one purchase, she knew about it, would ask him about it. And again, this is not victim blaming. No. All of this is clear indication you either need marriage counseling or you need to divorce. That's what all of that is an indication of. It's never an indication of murder.
Right. And we shouldn't have to spell that out, but people will take things purposely out of context. I'm just saying in the relationship, I agree with you. I don't necessarily know if I would call him sociopathic. I'm not sure, but I get the impression he was the beta and he was the more emotional one in some ways. And, if anything, maybe borderline, who knows? Yeah. But just their whole relationship to me seemed unhealthy. That's just.
I think when she came home, they got into it, and I think it was a crime of passion. And then I don't know how he could justify in a convoluted mind to do that to his children. But I think he was just, I got to get rid of all of it, in that moment, and it was just a decision.
He also. What he did to her afterwards. Well, let me get through this first, but I think one of the things he did to her when he started being interviewed by the police and stuff, it wasn't just that he killed her and he killed his kids. He went further. He disparaged her name and lied about her character and what she did after she's dead, which is what we saw Jodi Arias do. And that I just find that so despicable. You've murdered this person and now you're lying about them and accusing them of things they didn't do. And they're not there to defend themselves because you took them out of this world. That's just. I'm gonna stop with this because I've got another video queued up. There was a lot of video footage around this one. There's so the day that she's missing, her friend Nicole, which is confusing because the woman he was having an affair with, turns out her name was Nicole also, but it's a different woman. The day that she went missing, her friend Nicole is the one who made a big deal of it and got the cops involved and called the cops over to do a wellness check because his wife, Shanann, didn't show up she was picking her up for a doctor's appointment for, about the new baby. And so here, let me share this. So the cop came over and we got a lot of footage there of the friend and of him, and his body language is just off. Mm-hmm. He shows up, and this is very long, so we're not going to play the whole thing, but he shows up and he kind of nonchalantly goes in the garage and then he lets them in the front door. And so this is when they're walking around looking and making phone calls. Okay.
Does she work? Yeah, she works from home. Oh, from home? She works business for Lifeline.
And he just said, "Oh, here's her phone."
Mm-hmm. And this is her wedding ring. Yeah.
They're going to do sleep with. They don't leave anywhere without them.
But nothing else appears to be missing though. Just stuff you take for a quick trip. Does she work?
Yeah, she works from home.
Oh, from home. It was shut down.
Yeah. Well, what's originally under the cover on the cat? You know where that's is?
I don't know where password.
Used to be 2385 and now it's 6 digits.
Previous due date.
131 8
What does she do for work?
He works direct sales company called Drive.
And you see him stand here and continue to, he goes on his phone and is texting people. You find out later, I believe he was also texting his mistress from the crime scene, which makes me think of Scott Peterson, you know, who was calling his mistress during the vigil for Lacey. The wedding ring that you mentioned, that's about to happen. And watch what he does. He goes in the bedroom and then he discovers her wedding ring, which they missed so far. And then but the way he brings it out on his finger is bizarre.
Were you able to pull up the video at the 1210? Was it front door? That was you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ed was beeping at me out the field.
He's got it on his finger and he's holding it like way away from his body. Like, so he keeps pacing. I'm going to skip ahead to, if anybody hasn't, Mystery Chris, have you seen this footage before?
No, I've never even heard of this guy.
Okay, this one I think you're going to find very interesting. So get this. On the same body cam footage, they decide to go next door and see if any of the neighbors have any ring cameras or any outdoor cameras that might have picked something up. Because Chris is saying, oh, somebody must have come here and kidnapped her. And so they go next door to this neighbor who does have a camera. And they're like, can you pull up the footage from last night? Let's see if there's anyone on the camera who is, you know, picking her up, if we can see her leaving the house. And actually in real time, you're watching him watch this footage and get real sweaty because the only person is him pulling his truck up to such an angle you can't see what he's loading into the truck, but there's no other vehicle that comes by. So watch his body language here, watching this with the police officer and the neighbor.
Rubbers today. That's what was out so far.
Is this on continually
Yep.
recording?
Yep. Well,
It's not. Is it motion or is it?
event,
Okay, so it's motion.
Any motion event that happens, but I get cars driving from this street, And this is him at 5:17.
That's him. He goes, this is him at 5:17 a.m. And we later found out this is him loading the bodies of his family into the car.
inside, trying to get everything back in. Be easier, so loading everything out there, all the tools that I had to bring in.
So you see how he's got his hands up on his head like that?
And just the sweating, all the perspiration.
Yeah, the
because
sweating.
the neighbor just said, you never pull your truck into the garage, and then you did, and he's explaining, well, I had a bunch of tools I had to load, but he had never before pulled the truck and backed the truck into the garage before he left.
Never before. Yeah. The neighbor's like, you usually park over there, you know? This body language here, I don't know if you guys have ever noticed, or if you're a runner yourself, when you're having trouble breathing, when your heart rate's up and you're having trouble filling up your lungs because your heart is racing, and you'll see a lot of runners just do this without even thinking about it. Like you're opening up your chest. He is having, his heart rate is up. He is having trouble breathing normally. And he's got his hands up there like he just ran a marathon because he's so freaking nervous. Not somebody who's like, oh, my wife and kids are missing. Let me see what's on the camera. But I can't believe I have to watch this with everyone here, right?
Surprised he's not saying it's fake. It's like, oh, no, that's fake. It's not real. It's not me.
It's AI. Mystery Chris did it. He keeps one hand up there. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Simon says.
What else can I do with this?
My detective just showed up, so he'll probably want to talk to you. You'd probably, like I said, he might have you call at the bank and see if there's any kind of activity.
Because if there is any sort of action out there,
His camera.
I would have got it.
Like
Right.
we had issues the other week when people were stealing stuff out of like garages and stuff like that, and I had parked my truck
I
right
had
here.
it parked right here.
Yeah. So someone,
See if
I could
anything
see where
happened.
someone tried to jimmy with a flathead screwdriver over there, and it was just like.
But if any action would have happened, any cars or anything left your house, I would
Yeah,
have
they would
got
have
it.
been like right in that area. It should pick.
Oh, it'll pick up anything coming down the street this way.
You know where that tree is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Watch, I'll show you. There's nothing on here. We've already watched that one.
So he's saying, yeah, did you hear that, Mr. Chris? The neighbor. God bless the neighbor. Because he's like, well, maybe there were other cars coming that might have picked her up. That he's basically still trying to go on this story of maybe she was abducted by someone from the house. And the neighbor's like, oh no, we would have caught any cars coming and going. There's nothing on here. I already checked. Like,
And then right before it cuts off, and after Chris Watts has already walked out, the neighbor turns to the cop and says he's acting really weird.
yeah, here, let me fast forward to that part.
What if he's putting his hands on his head because, like, subconsciously he knew he was going to get arrested? So he's like, "Oh, might as well put my hands up."
Yeah, it's so this, like looking at his phone and keeping one hand up there,
Doing the
it's
Macarena.
like,
He'd be fine. It just seems kind of odd to me. Why would he hold that truck up and go to the garage?
Right.
Yeah, I've never seen him pull back.
I've never seen him. If he loads his stuff, he normally just walks back and forth because I get him on camera.
What does he usually load up?
All he usually has is a lunchbox and a book bag, looks like a computer, and usually a water jug. That's it. But the fact that he was in here and explaining to it over and over and over,
Well, odd.
he doesn't look worried. He looks like he's trying to cover his tracks. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And if he's loading his stuff, why isn't he walking back and forth?
there's more of this. If you guys find this interesting, there's 2+ hours of this body cam footage, and there's more with Chris Watts. And this neighbor, I mean, is the star of this video, in my opinion, and thank God for him and his camera. But yeah, he's trying to get something out of the cop. It's pretty funny. I noticed Nomo's here tonight, who is former law enforcement. Yeah, Nomo gang. I've said this before in part 1. I'm recently retired LEO, having dealt with some rather undesirable characters over the years. I don't watch any true crime stuff. Yeah, it was your job. But my wife does incessantly. Well, if you are law enforcement, then you probably know. Tell me if I get this right, but in that video, the neighbor's making some judgments and saying, like you said, Tracy, he's not acting normal. He's not acting right. And why would he do this? And the cop very professionally doesn't give him anything. Like the cop may be thinking the same thing, but he's not like, oh, you're right. Like, I agree. He's just keeping it. Oh, really? Just asking questions. If I was very pro.
Any surveillance tapes or body cam footage, or even like just interrogation I've ever watched, the cops are always super professional. They're unemotional, and they're very, very friendly with whoever they're talking to. I know that's a tactic to get more out of your suspect, but none of them have ever been just, like you see on dramatizations of crime, in the face, yelling, screaming, being passive aggressive. I've never seen that in actual true interrogation footage. It's always just, they're very friendly and kind of, sort of like that.
They try and build that rapport with the person. So the next video I have, I'm going to skip some of the ones because it's just too much to watch all of them, but there's a lot of footage in this case. So there's a few things about him that remind me of Jodi Arias. He continually lies and changes his story piece by piece. So his first story, of course, is he doesn't know what happened to his wife and kids at all. He wasn't there. They disappeared. They even ask him in the first interrogation, which I'm not going to pull up that video, but he flat out lies. They ask him if he's having an affair. No, not having an affair. He lies. Finally, he comes clean because they know about the affair. And hold on one second. Hey, puppy. Hey. I'm dog sitting. This is that's not Tiger's bark for anyone who doesn't know. But he comes clean, and they, in the second interview here, I think Anthony's home. That's right. Okay. So in the second interview here, this lady on the left, this is a very long video. This is the second interrogation, and this video includes the lie detector test. So he agrees to do a polygraph. And the first interrogation, he sticks to his story. Their marriage is great. He doesn't know what happened. That's it. In the second interrogation, she tells him, and she's pretty badass. She's friendly, like you said, Tracy, and they, builds this rapport with him. But she tells him flat out, when you do this polygraph, you and I both are going to know if you're lying. Right now, only you know if you're lying, but if we do this polygraph, we're all going to know.
Yeah, people fell in love with her because she became kind of a quasi celebrity. That sweater that she's wearing actually sold out in 2 online outlets, right?
Really?
Because women were buying that particular sweater to look just like her.
I didn't know that.
It's just one of those weird facts.
That's something I would totally do. What is the sweater the cop is wearing? So then he does the polygraph. You can watch her administer the polygraph here in the middle of the video. We're not going to watch this. This is after they leave the room and look at the polygraph results, and they come back in. So this is what she says to him.
So I brought Graham in here because we want to talk to you about the results, okay?
Sure.
So it is completely clear that you were not honest during the testing, and I think you already know that. He did not pass the polygraph test.
Okay.
Okay. So now we need to talk about what actually happened. I feel like you're probably ready to do that.
I didn't lie to you on that polygraph, I promise. Chris, I know. Stop. Stop for a minute. Take a deep breath. I want you to take a deep breath right now.
Are you giggling, Mr. Chris?
Yeah. He's like, stop, dude. Come on, man.
Yeah.
Stop.
Just stop.
Stop. Get some help.
Get some help. Yeah. She's like, Dude, we know. We told you we were going to know. We know.
But what people don't realize for a police officer that, okay, yeah, obviously he lied and they knew he lied. He was just screaming, I lied. But polygraphs are not admissible as evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not a good indicator of lies versus truth because they're based on your respiration and your heart rate, which if you're just nervous because you're being talked to by the police, it can cack off on a lie. And that's the reason they're not admissible in a court. So if you're, and I've had my law enforcement friends tell me this, if you're ever brought in and take a consent to a polygraph, even if they come in and try to say you failed it, just ignore it and ask for a lawyer because there's, they're not admissible. It's just a tactic to try to get you to confess.
And it works. They do a great job of breaking him down. And I love her no nonsense attitude because she's like, I do this. I've done this all the time. I know how to read the results. He says, you failed. Let's talk about what really happened. And as someone in the chat mentioned, someone familiar with this case, Nat says he confesses to his father. So at some point, he finally admits to the affair and he tries to play off, well, I failed the polygraph test because I was lying and I'm actually having an affair. And they even say to him, we know all about Nicole. Like they're like, we already knew you were lying about that. That's not why you failed. You also failed on these questions about what happened to your family. And so he finally, I think, sees the writing on the wall. So he asked to speak to his dad and they let his dad come in. And this is fascinating because he tests out the next version of his story on his dad. Sort of like with Jodi Arias when she first said, she wasn't there at all. She didn't know what happened. And then her next story was, I was there and there were these other people and they were attacked. They attacked us and there were these other people there and it was there. And then the third story was, okay, there was no one else there. It was just me. I did it, but it was self-defense. His story kept changing like that. So this is his second version. And he first runs it past his dad to see if his dad will buy it. And this is the disgusting lie that I was talking about. He basically says, okay, I did do it, Dad, but it was because my wife, Shanann, killed the kids. And so then I killed her. And then I covered all three of the deaths up, which doesn't even make any whatever. But he's testing this out on his own father to see if his father goes for it here.
Well, she won't tell me what's going on or what happened or anything, or you know anything about when we had that conversation that morning, it was emotional. It was told her about separation and everything like that. Mm-hmm. What happened after that? I went downstairs and I want to protect her. What? I want to protect her. You don't want to protect her? I don't know what else to say. What happened? Huh? She hurt him? Yeah.
I just find that so disgusting. He says really under his breath kind of, I don't want to protect her. Like, I don't want to protect her image. I don't want to protect her. And then he whispers, because I think it's so hard for him to say maybe, but she strangled them. She hurt them. Just despicable to try this out. Like, this is why I killed her, because she did this. And fortunately, absolutely unbelievable. And by the time he got to trial, I believe at trial he pled guilty to all three. Isn't that right?
Yeah. There wasn't a trial. He pled guilty.
He just pled guilty.
He got murder on all three of them, plus unlawful termination of a pregnancy on I think the baby she had in her belly was 7 or 8 months. So
just despicable. There's one other video. I'm just going to show it to you guys. We don't have to watch it, but this does exist, where he finally confessed to to what he did to all of his family, including his daughters. He confessed to killing his daughters once he was already in jail. He talked to the press about it, and if you want to, you can go and listen to that. This is the jailhouse confession. If that gives you any more insight into why a person would do something like this. But I think it's sort of what you said, Tracy. It was he was having this affair. He had this fantasy life. He wanted the fantasy life to continue. He saw the family as being in the way, and they had a fight about divorce or, the affair or something, and he just snapped and lost it. Here, let me stop sharing that one. I've got a question for you in the chat, Tracy. What is your opinion on the Karen Reed case?
Unfortunately, I really don't know enough about that one to offer an opinion, but it's one that I'm willing to research and maybe do a video on. If you'd like to see that, I'm happy to do that. There's so many that I want to do a video on, I just haven't gotten to, but I have not researched that one enough to offer an opinion. I'm so sorry.
This one, before we move on from this one, there's just a couple of other, and if you guys have anything to add on it, there's a couple of other fascinating things about this one that just bother me. One is there's also videotaped interviews with his mistress, his affair partner, whose name was Nicole, and she has problems too. That's just at a bare minimum, and she claimed zero involvement. They cleared her. They said she had no involvement, but it was never explained, to my satisfaction and to many other people, that a year or so before, so they met each other at work, and a year before they started their affair, she was Googling in her internet records. They subpoenaed her records. She was Googling his wife's name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and she pretended, she lied to the police in her interrogation, said she didn't know his wife's name or something, pretended like she didn't know. Yeah. Well, you had zeroed in on him a year before the affair started. And it makes me angry because I think women like her who have no respect whatsoever for boundaries, she was probably spending all of that year trying to get him to notice her and to start this workplace
There
affair.
have been GPS records of her cell phone pinging in the area of his house on the day Shanann and the girls died.
Yeah.
So I believe she's more in on it than they would like, than we're being let on. I think she was accomplice. I think she was in on it, and I think she's a filthy murderer. I think he probably let her know somehow that had happened, and she headed over there. I'm not saying this was pre-planned or premeditated, but she knows a lot more than she's letting on.
She at the very least, she was complicit, not just in the affair, I think, but in I think she purposefully set her sights on this dude. Because why are you looking up his wife's name before, like a year before you guys even start the affair? And then before her internet records, before the murder, like a month or so before the murder, her internet search records, she was looking up wedding dresses. She
will my boyfriend leave his wife for me?
Yes.
And
then questions like that.
Yeah. And then she also Googled what happened to Scott Peterson's affair partner. Did people hate her? Stuff like that. Well, there's a big difference between her and you. That woman honestly did not know he was married, and she broke it off with him as soon as she found out and was completely 100% compliant in the investigation. Totally opposite of her.
She asked the internet.
Yeah.
Yes. She asked the internet, will my married boyfriend, or it was like, exactly, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but will he leave his wife for me? How do you know?
Yeah.
Might as well just type in, am I a whore?
.com. Hi, if you've ended up here, you're a whore. Oh, yeah, Google's crazy. People type all kinds of questions out into the universe to Google. Yeah, but this woman, I'm so glad you share that opinion, Tracy. I do not like her. I don't like her affect in the interviews. I think it's
she is a 100% see you next Tuesday. And this is not a word that I use lightly because I really don't like the word, but in certain cases, no other word fits, and that definitely fits her.
Yeah, absolutely. He was also doing weird stuff like, he was giving her, these sort of childish romantic cards and stuff about her being the love of his life and everything. And when his wife took the kids to see their grandparents in North Carolina, he didn't go with them. He stayed home so he could, have alone time with his girlfriend, unbeknownst to them. And, took all these sexy photos of her, and he was doing all that stuff. But he did this right after, I think it was the day of or the day after. It was the day of the murder. He sent her the lyrics to a song. Do you remember that song?
It was a Metallica song. I don't know the exact name, but part of it was must kill the family, must kill the children, must kill the family.
Yes. He actually sent her these lyrics about, kind of like what he had just done.
Yeah.
Anyway, there were a lot of weird little things like that about this case. So this is when I don't know, I was pouring over because, again, how does a father do that? The front porch conservative. Hello, sir. I showed up at just the right time. Who's a whore? We're talking about the girlfriend of Chris Watts. We're doing True Crime Part 2. And we were talking about the girlfriend who kind of got off the hook completely, but had some very disturbing internet searches. Look at Mark. Hey, internet, can the cops find my Google searches about murder?
Yeah, seriously.
Oh, I'm going down if anything ever happens in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, how do people not know that anymore?
Oh, man. Okay, which one should we do? We could do O.J. Simpson. I've got Jeffrey McDonald stuff pulled up. How about Jeffrey McDonald? No. Let's do O.J. first. Have you guys seen? Yeah. Have you seen Mystery Chris, the Lost interview?
No.
Okay. So some people know that O.J. got paid a lot of money to write a book. Well, he had a ghostwriter. And it was called If I Did It. And it was a hypothetical book about how he killed his ex-wife if he had been the one who killed her and Ron Goldman.
I'm not laughing at the crime. It's just, can you imagine being that? Because I have ghostwritten for people. Can you imagine being that ghostwriter and having to pour over O.J. Simpson's notes and be fearful for your life?
That ghostwriter, I've got an interview with him pulled up. Yes, he found it all very strange, to say the least. So he wrote this book. Have either of you read If I Did It?
No.
Okay, I read it.
Really?
Yes, it reminds me of the reason I have Jeffrey McDonald pulled up. I think they're very similar. Now, maybe different IQ levels in terms of one being a smarter killer, but they both got caught, thank God. But in terms of their personality type, I think they're very similar. So in his book, If I Did It, it reminded me of Jeffrey McDonald, who hired Joe McGinnis to do a true crime novel about him. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of a similar situation. It's this writer who's following her around and doing a book about him. And that Joe McGinnis ended up thinking, this dude is guilty. He was like,
flipped on him.
Guilty. Flipped on him. Yes. And that book was called Fatal Vision. But what's similar about the two books is there's all these little tells where it's sort of like a narcissist or a psychopath sort of winking at you, sort of that that grin, that sort of I'm getting away with it, like they're enjoying telling you about it. They're enjoying giving these small little reveals, sort of duper's delight. And I definitely got that from the If I Did It book, that he couldn't help himself at times. Really, I think rather enjoyed having this avenue to confess but not confess, because it was a loophole, right? It's a hypothetical, he kept saying. So here, I've got the missing interview, which I'm so glad you haven't seen this because this will be new. But first, Wicked Psyched, thank you for the super chat, says, for the $5 super chat says, my concern with true crime watching shows is that they could sway jurors to think anyone charged is probably guilty. Just a thought. I don't know.
There have been research on how much true crime content affects the outcome of trials. But what they have found is that even though it seems like true crime is all the rage, and it is, that the percentage of people that slavishly follow it is so low when you come into an ordinary everyday jury pool that it really doesn't affect it all that much. Now, what affects it more, instead of like being a hardcore true crimer, is mainstream media weighing in on it. That can affect more people per capita, of course, but they haven't found that it really affects jury selection all that much.
I did read that for Dateline, there were some people concerned that some people had watched a certain Dateline episode, and then when whoever's in jail for that crime that was revealed in that episode, whenever they have a new trial, they're concerned that people have already watched the previous episode and they already know all these information from the previous trial, when they really want people who are fresh to that particular trial.
I actually think it has had the opposite effect in some ways than what Wicked was saying here in the super chat, because I think a lot of jurors, because these procedural crime dramas started becoming very popular, some of them being true crime shows about real crimes like Cold Case Files, Forensic Files, but others being these fictional drama type series like CSI. I think what happened as a result of that is you got a lot of jurors who became so used to seeing stories like in Forensic Files and or plot lines in these dramatic series like CSI that involved always DNA evidence, that they came to say, we need this every time to convict. And so I think you started to see more hung juries because jurors would go into the box expecting everything to be pat and all sewn up every time, when your instruction if you're on the jury is beyond a reasonable doubt, not any doubt, not any kind of, could there be any possible, could aliens have come down and done it? Yes, I guess so.
Yeah.
But that's not a reasonable doubt.
If you want a really good dramatization of what happens in a jury room, there's the classic story 12 Angry Men. Now there's the old one from the 1960s, and then there's the remake from the early 2000s. I prefer that one because it has the great James Gandolfini in it. But it really shows how things like that can affect a jury, and how really they all finally came to the same conclusion because they finally looked at what they'd been instructed to look at. They were all pulling in experiences and what they thought, but when they finally just broke it down and looked at the presented evidence, they were able to make a decision that was correct.
Yeah. I definitely think this happens. And I know in my experience, I served on a jury. Now, this was not for murder. This was for a DWI. And we had a hung jury in part because they didn't want to convict. He had 2 different blood alcohol tests. He was way over on both of them, but they were the people on my jury, more than half of them were like, I don't really trust the science. How do they really know? It's like, okay, I don't know. It was just bizarre. I don't know what they needed to give a guilty. It was.
I've been on 2 juries. One was a very high profile traffic accident civil case for a lot of money. That was pretty point blank because there was video camera footage and all of that. One was an abuse case on a small child. And that one was very difficult. And we had one juror who was also a grandfather. It was a grandfather abusing his granddaughter, or step granddaughter rather. And there was one man on our jury that was a grandfather himself that just could not fathom that a grandfather would do that to his grandkids. And we almost had a hung jury, but he eventually came around. But it was pretty obvious what had happened, but he just could not fathom that a grandfather would do that. And God bless him, but
Well, let's move into the O.J. Simpson case. This is a huge case. We don't have enough time to barely scratch the surface, but I do want to highlight a couple things, including the lost interview about the book, If I Did It. And I saw someone in the chat mentioned that Ron Goldman's family, where's that? I lost it, but somewhere here they were talking about Ron Goldman's family. Yeah, a civil court decided in 2007 that the book was going to be, I think the proceeds were going to be given to Ron Goldman's family. Oh yeah, here it was. In August of 2007, a Florida bankruptcy court awarded the rights to the book to the Goldman family to partially satisfy the civil judgment. And so then they changed the title to If I Did It, Confessions of the Killer. And they did make the if on the typeface very tiny, so it looked like I did it. You know, that was their way of feeling some justice. And the book was published. So in 2006, he did O.J. Simpson. Now this is before the book, the rights went to Ron Goldman's family. The book was already written, or he was in the process of writing it with this ghostwriter or something. He did this interview and it wasn't aired. They decided to scrap it. And then it resurfaced 12 years later, and Fox finally aired it, him talking about it. And so people call it the lost interview because so much time passed between when he did this and when it came out. So here, we're going to watch him talking about If He Did It. Have you seen this, Tracy?
I haven't. I'm fascinated.
Okay. The Lost Confession. Here we go.
Uninterrupted minutes. OJ puts himself hypothetically at the scene of the crime.
The chapter 6 is called The Night in Question. And you write in the book, now picture this and keep in mind that this is
purely
hypothetical.
Yes.
Why don't you tell me what might have happened on the night of June 12th, 1994? And let's just walk through the night.
Well, first of all, this is very difficult for me to do this. It was very difficult for me because it's hypothetical. I know and I accept the fact that people are going to feel whatever way they're going to feel. You know, they're going to, you know, some whatever they want to feel. In the book, the hypothetical is
Charlie.
Charlie. This guy Charlie shows up, the guy who I had recently become friends with, and I don't know why he had been by Nicole's house, but it told me you wouldn't believe what's going on over there. And I remember thinking, well, whatever's going on over there has got to stop, right? So we kind of hooked up together, and you know, I'm kind of broad stroking this. We go over, get into Bronco and go over.
Let's just go back and do the details. Where did you park?
See the detail.
You park
in the hypothetical in the alley.
Right. You park in the alley.
Yeah.
And you put on a wool cap and gloves.
In the hypothetical, I put on a cap and gloves.
Right. Yeah. And you reached under the seat for
a knife. I always kept a knife in the car for the crazies and stuff because you can't travel with a gun. And I remember Charlie saying, "You ain't bringing that." And I didn't, right? But I believe he took it.
Charlie took the knife?
Yeah. In the book.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
by the way, this guy Charlie, he makes this character up. I don't. Some people think Charlie was based on someone, a second person who helped him with this crime that we don't know, and people have ideas on who that could be. I don't think Charlie was anybody. I think it's a figment of, it's a way he separates himself from the crime as he sort of places him outside of himself as his dark character friend. That's this part of him that did this. Okay. That's how
Frank Drebin.
Who's that?
Frank Drebin.
The Naked Gun. I love those movies, but every time I watch them, I keep thinking about, you know, especially like the third one that came out like a year before the murders. I'm like, wow.
Was it 33 1/3? Is that what it was?
Yeah, 30, yeah.
I wish I had taken a photo of this. Oh man. Oh, maybe I did. I'll have to send this to you. 2 days ago, we were in an antique shop and they had a stack of old Jet magazines from the 70s and 80s. He was on the cover of one, and it was before the murders, of course. And it was just, he is a hero. And it's just so weird looking at something like that now, and or the Naked Gun movies and knowing what he did.
Well, if you look at like any ESPN or sports magazine stuff that came out prior to the murders, they were ranking him as one, if not the greatest running back in the NFL history. But now, like, they usually leave him off. I'm like, well, yeah, I know obviously the murder stuff that's gonna make people uncomfortable, but still, what he did on the field in the NFL is one of the greatest performances we've ever seen from a running back.
I mean, it's pretty obvious what happened. He was insanely jealous and thought he was stalking her, saw Ron Goldman there, and thought they were about to get it on, and he killed him. Crime of passion, pretty standard issue.
He details in the book, which I'll show you something else after this, some of his violent encounters with her, and it's so weird in the book how he tries to play them off.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is him continuing with his hypothetical, if I killed them, here's how it happened.
The back gate, you go through the back gate.
Yes.
And it was open or broken or?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I go to the front and I'm looking to see what's going on. And I can see that it appears like Nicole had I had.
By the way, he's lying. He's lying here from what he put in the book, because in the book, and talking to the ghostwriter who was interviewed about this, he was almost like, when he was describing the night, the hypothetical to the ghostwriter, he would get really upset about certain things, sort of belying, like showing that this actually happened, of course. And one of those things was the gate. So as he's telling the ghostwriter about that night, he starts talking about, and the gate was broken, and I've told her 100 times to fix the gate, and I've, he got like angry about it. And so now he's like, no, I don't remember about the gate.
Had candles all the time. She really did, to keep her overhead down, I think. And music was on, and while I was there, a guy shows up.
So Ron Goldman comes in the back gate.
Yeah, a guy that I really didn't recognize. I may have seen him around, but I really didn't recognize him to be anyone. And in the mood I was in, I started having words with him.
He says to you, I just came by to return a pair of glasses. Judy left them at the restaurant.
Yeah, words to that effect, yes.
And he was
I don't know if I believed it or didn't believe it. It was pretty much immaterial because, I was more concerned about everything that was going on, and was fed up with it, I guess. And
you get into a fight. Nicole comes out.
A verbal
fight.
Got a little loud, and by that time, Nicole had come out, and we started having words about who is this guy, why is he here, what's going on.
And she says, "This is my house. Get the F out of here."
Yes, and which I didn't like, because once again, this is the same person, and if you read the book, you'll see some things that happened in the 2 weeks leading up to this that were very, very irritating, and I think Charlie had followed this guy in, wanted to make sure it was no problem, and he brought the knife. As things got heated, I just remember Nicole fell and hurt herself. And this guy kind of got into a karate thing. And I said, well, you think you can kick my ass? And I remember I grabbed the knife. I do remember that portion, taking the knife from Charlie. And to be honest, after that, I don't remember, except I'm standing there and there's all kind of stuff around. And
what kind of stuff?
Blood and stuff around. I hate to say this, but this is I'm sorry.
Right.
I know we got.
Jeez.
Isn't that crazy? The laughing. Like, even if he, again, I always imagine if these people were telling the truth. Okay, let's say he didn't kill them, he had nothing to do with it, but for some crazy reason, he decided to write a book that if I did it, and it's still your estranged wife, the mother of your kids, is murdered brutally, and you're recounting this and laughing about it. It's just something so wrong with you, right?
Oh, OJ.
So weird.
Got to back up again.
Right. It's okay. I want to back
this
up.
is hard. This is
This
hard.
is hard. I know. I want to back
it's
up
hard
to.
try to make people think that I'm.
You wrote in the book, I had never seen so much blood in my life.
Yes.
Covered. You're covered. The scene. Can you describe it?
It's hard for me to describe it. I'm telling you. I don't think any two people could be murdered the way they were without everybody being covered in blood. And of course, I think we've all seen the grisly pictures after. So yeah, I think everything would have been covered in blood.
And what goes through your mind at a time like that?
I don't know. It's like, what happened?
Right. You write about removing a glove before taking the knife from Charlie.
I had no conscious memory of doing that, but obviously I must have, because they found the glove there.
Hypothetically.
I know that's such what? Like
But they
you're
found the
making up
glove.
That's weird. Why wouldn't he just make up that? I don't.
Yeah, continue, Mr. Chris. Continue this line of thinking. This is what.
Yeah, like, but why wouldn't you fill in those blankets? Say, well, I don't remember. If it's fake, then you should be easily come up with some kind of story to fill in those gaps. But again, like Comet said, he's talking from a personal experience.
He's talking from personal experience, and he goes back and forth between. It would have happened like this too. Well, it did happen like this, and I don't remember why I took the glove off, but he can't keep them separate because it's real. It's so bizarre that this happened and this guy got off, and it's just.
It's like he starts to enjoy himself and you like put too much detail, then it's like, oh, I got to roll back and say, oh yeah, I don't remember. I was like, I blacked out, but then I came around and then I made a sandwich, and then it's like it starts getting specific again. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And blacking out. Have you ever blacked out before?
Not to my knowledge. No. Of course, if something like this would take place in anybody's life, if it were to happen, I would imagine it's something that you would probably automatically have trouble wrapping your mind around it. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
Staggering first-hand details about the crime scene, which he says are hypothetical.
You wrote in the book, I had never seen so much blood in my life.
Yes. It's hard for me to describe it, I'm telling you. I don't think any two people could be...
You're taking off your shoes, your pants, and your shirt and dropping it in a bundle. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And do you remember what happened?
Because what are you going to do with it? Somebody's got to get rid of, as you may have called during the trial, is that wear the bloody clothes. So somebody had to get rid of the bloody clothes.
Right. And you had left your keys and wallet in your pants pocket, and you had to go back and get it?
To be honest, I think I know that to be true. Yes.
And Charlie is hysterical, screaming, "Jesus Christ, OJ, Jesus Christ!" And you tell him to shut up.
Yeah, he's in a panic. He was in a panic, and I'm telling him to shut up. Let's get out of here.
So you get back in the car. You take in your clothes, put them in the bundle,
and drove back and parked a block away because I knew the limo would be there, and came across the backyard through the 2 tennis courts and, came through the house.
So you went through the neighbors?
Neighbors, yeah. He had a tennis court, then I had a tennis court.
And you go into the house, and what happens in the house?
I ran upstairs to take a shower. I actually ran upstairs and took some of my bags and came back downstairs and put them out front.
So that's part of that lost interview. It's, again, if you want to see someone who you know is a liar, lying about one of the most horrific things you could do to someone, let alone your family, go watch that interview. I don't think given how much time we have, I don't think I'm going to pull up the interview with the author of the book, but you can go listen to that one if you want to. The ghostwriter who clearly thought he was guilty.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Did I speak over you?
Your mic is cutting in and out just a little bit.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
you
I
sound muffled.
It's back now. It's good.
Okay.
need to get sit closer to it. My back is hurting, so I'm moving around, but I'm going to focus on staying still. Let's see. What is this thing that you included? I think you included this.
Oh yeah, have you heard of this? So you pull up that first link. So have you heard about the conspiracy theory that involves his son?
No.
So there's a conspiracy theory that his son committed the crime and that OJ tried to cover it up. I'm not saying I believe this, but I just still find it fascinating because I like conspiracy theories.
So his oldest son by his first wife, I'm assuming.
I think so. Yeah.
Because I think their
That's the one
children
that's
were still young, very young when this happened.
yeah.
Oh no, I had not heard of this. This is ridiculous. I'm already judging this. This is so stupid. There's
I
no
don't
way.
know. Read on.
There's no way you read all of the evidence and think it wasn't him, given his whole history with her, the other violent incidents, the way he was stalking her. Even there, you can tell he's upset talking about. He would go and stand outside her window and look at her like Jodi Arias did to Travis, like looking at her to see if she's on a date with someone. Her diary entries about how abusive and controlling he was. The O.J. Simpson conspiracy that O.J.'s son Jason killed Simpson is not new. The crime book, O.J. is innocent and I can prove it.
It's awesome.
No.
Why would Jason Simpson have a motive to kill his stepmother?
Well, it goes on to say that he has like some kind of mental issues, psychological issues, and he was upset that she didn't show up to like I think this restaurant. He was working at a restaurant or something, and that caused him to go crazy.
No, this is so dumb. This is, again, the most likely answer is usually the answer. What is that theory about the most likely? Do you know what I'm talking about? Where people try to overcomplicate things, but it's actually usually the most obvious answer. I am going to read this later. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to read it here. I think it's a waste of time. Here,
so fascinating.
Let me show you something. So I was looking to see if there were any excerpts of. I told you I read the book. If I did it, they did get someone to read the book. If you want to listen to an audio version, who sounds kind of like him. And this YouTube channel that I just stumbled on took some of the audio excerpts and smashed them up with footage of him and just shows. I'm just going to play it. Not only because it's a weird video, but because it shows some of the violent incidents he's describing that I mentioned that he sort of plays off in the book. Like, yeah, and then I took a bat and, I beat up the hood of the car and she tried to make it like it was this big deal. It's just so weird.
Picture this and keep in mind, this is hypothetical.
The music.
To most people, I'd been somebody once. I had my glory days on the playing field, a number of high-paying corporate gigs, many years as a football analyst, and even something of a career as a Hollywood actor. She was a stunner, blonde, slim, and bright-eyed. "Who are you?" I asked. "Nicole." One night in 1984, we were in the middle of another argument, and I went outside to get away from her. There was a tetherball hanging from one of the trees and a baseball bat lying nearby. Nicole came out of the house and watched me for a few moments. I still had the bat in my hand, and I remember flipping it into the air and accidentally hitting one of the rims. "You going to pay for that?" she snapped. "Yeah," I snapped back, and then took the bat and whacked the hood. "I guess I'll pay for that, too, since it's my car, and since I pay for everything around here." Nicole looked at me again. I smiled, and she smiled. A few weeks later, we set a date for the marriage.
The dark humor is just off. Whoever cut this together Just this, but it reads like that. It's crazy because he's always sort of in the book. It's this the what did you say? Delusions of grandeur, Tracy, that some of these guys have. The book, it's sort of he's always describing these violent altercations or encounters, and he's always slagging her off and sort of criticizing her. But then the next minute, he's writing about how much she loved him, and as if she was just enamored with him, and it just reads like this is all his fantastical version of what their what their very abusive relationship was like. Occam's razor. Yes, thank you. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. So I'm going to drop this link in the chat because
I'm going to go back and watch that. That's
you have to. I'm going to put it in the private chat too.
I'm going to see if I can find the entire audiobook because I want to listen to it, the whole thing now.
Yeah, listen to it. It's incredible. I would love to talk with you once you've done so, because I think it's just so revealing about the mind of a narcissist, and it really reminds me of the Jeffrey McDonald Fatal Vision book. Because it's all, I mean, who would do that? What innocent person is like, yeah, let me write a book about if I killed my
ex-wife.
Ex-wife, like what? Okay. How about, should we try to hit one more before we wrap this up? There's way too much. We're going to go 3 hours again if we try to do all of these. How about Jeffrey McDonald?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep thinking of Michael McDonald. He's not a serial killer, is he?
No, not that I know of.
That's good. I like him.
So this is an older one. So this isn't one that I anyway followed in the news like we did some of these other cases like Chris Watts or the Daybell case or even OJ, which I remember the Bronco chase when I was in middle school.
I think I was in high school.
Yeah. So this is older. This was 1970, and this was another case of a father killing his whole family. Yep. And he was a Green Beret. Some people call these the Green Beret murders. I'm going to just pull up
Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And he was an Army doctor, special ops, and killed his wife and 3 daughters.
And he was a highly intelligent man. There's no question if you hear him in interviews. But I think much like OJ had this need to sort of confess, but not really confess. And that book by Joe McGinnis is worth a read, Fatal Vision, because he was such a narcissist that he thought he could have this author, this true crime writer, close to him, and that he could con him and get him to see what he wanted him to see. And that turned out not to be the case.
Yeah, this one was strange because I think there was a mistrial and then there was a couple of appeals, and he was in jail, then he got out. He was out for several years before he was finally retried and sentenced, found guilty and sentenced. So this was a long drawn out case. It was only because of Colette's, his wife that he murdered, her stepfather, like Mr. Kazan, went after him hard. He loved that girl like his own daughter, and he wasn't going to let him get away with it. Kasab, not Kazan, Kasab.
Kasab, he stayed on the case.
Yeah, he was an Iranian immigrant and had built a life here and married Colette's mother and raised her like she was his own daughter. And he was not, that angry Muslim father was coming out in him. He was not going to let his daughter just be butchered like that.
Yeah. So he claimed this happened a couple years after the Manson murders. Okay. So those were all over the news. People, of course, one of the biggest true crime cases ever. People were all over that case. There were so many elements of that. Of course, that you have a Hollywood movie star who was murdered by these crazy hippies who lived on a cult commune with this cult leader, Charles Manson. Robert Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate, was one of the ones who was killed. And he took elements of that because it was in the public consciousness, and he wove it into this story. So he tried to say that some hippies came into the house and assaulted his family and these crazy cult-like hippies, and they had candles and they were, um, doing a seance of some kind, or they were doing hippie groovy stuff, whatever, and they killed his family. And it was so obviously, I think, drawn from
Yeah.
what just happened. And
They found the magazine with the Manson murders on the cover of it in the living room.
in the living room, he had been reading about it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what were you going to say, Mr. Chris?
Oh, sorry.
No, Tracy. You go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say the thing that really solidified it in most people's minds was two things. One, the story that he told didn't match up with anything. And then there was so much blood in this case that when they did simple blood analysis, there wasn't really anything, such as DNA, analysis there, but they did blood type analysis. The way that the different blood, all the people in the family had different blood types, which was very unusual. And so the blood types were crisscrossing all over the house. And so it was very obvious that somebody had been killed and drugged. And so it didn't match up with his story at all. And then the living room where he said that the hippies attacked him and he got into a fight with them, there were like greeting cards because it was just after a holiday on the bookshelves in this living room, just, up there, like just an open greeting card that would have obviously failed had there been a fight going on below them. So there was just all this little circumstantial evidence that really convicted him.
I remember that circumstantial evidence, the crime scene photos of the living room. There were, as you mentioned, things that in the struggle he had described would have been knocked over, but everything was just perfectly in place.
Mm-hmm.
Just very bizarre. Okay, we'll read a little bit about him, and then I do have some footage of him that I want to show you guys. This is a headline from the Fayetteville Observer. Jeffrey McDonald case intrigues 50 years later. The call for help came shortly after 3:30 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. The man who dialed the operator relayed a desperate situation. He said his name was Captain McDonald. There had been stabbings, and he needed a doctor, military police, and an ambulance to come to his home at 544 Castle Drive on Fort Bragg. Soon, the military police were on their way. It was February 17, 1970, some 50 years ago. When the military police arrived, they found Jeffrey McDonald lying next to his wife on a blood-covered floor in the master bedroom. The 26-year-old Army doctor had a puncture wound to his chest, but he was alive. Colette, 26, lay dead. So did 5-year-old Kimberly and 2-year-old Kristen in their rooms nearby. Who did this? The question terrified the people of Fayetteville and Fort Bragg on that miserable February morning, and it has captivated the public for 5 decades. McDonald, 76, is serving 3 consecutive life sentences in federal prison for the murders. He still says this, that he didn't do it.
Yeah.
He says he was wrongly convicted. Go ahead.
Oh, no. And they found his blood type all over the bathroom sink or the kitchen sink where it was obvious he had stabbed himself.
Yeah, where he cut himself. He says he was wrongly convicted, while the police let the real killers, often described as a group of 4, quote, drug-crazed hippies, end quote, get away. The facts for and against McDonald have been hashed out since 1970 in news accounts, at least 5 books, on television, and in modern times on websites and true crime podcasts. This account of the McDonald murders and their aftermath is drawn from court documents, newspaper archives, the true crime books Fatal Vision, Fatal Justice, and A Wilderness of Error, and the memories of people who lived in Fayetteville and Fort Bragg. She was also pregnant, as you mentioned. Yeah. Colette McDonald, 4 months pregnant, lay on her back on the floor in the master bedroom. Jeffrey McDonald lay face down with his head on Colette's shoulder or chest. Down the hall, Kimberly and Kristen were in their beds. Kimberly had been beaten in the head and stabbed, and Kristen was stabbed to death. Here was his story. It said he appeared partly conscious when the police found him. He later gave his description of what happened. He said he had been asleep on the living room couch and woke to the sound of screaming. When he awoke, he saw 2 white men, a black man, and a white woman in the living room with him. He said the black man wore an army jacket with sergeant stripes on the shoulder, and the woman had blonde hair, a floppy hat, and brown boots. The woman appeared to be holding a candle. McDonald recounted that the woman was saying, "Kill the pigs, acid's groovy." Kill the pigs, which of course was a reference to the Manson murders.
Mm-hmm. Acid is groovy. I could have come up with something better than that.
It's like, yeah, you're sitting there. What would a drug-addled hippie say? McDonald said he fought the intruders. One hit him in the head with a bat or a club, which he said he grabbed. He said he was stabbed with an ice pick. He said he kept fighting until he fell unconscious. McDonald said he awoke on the hallway floor and then searched the house and found the bodies. Investigators found a knife in the bedroom. They also found a blood-stained club, an ice pick, and another knife in the backyard. So all of the weapons are there.
Mm-hmm.
Investigators found a knife in the bedroom. Oh, wait, sorry. They found all of them. At the time, Fort Bragg was an open post with no security gates or checkpoints to stop anyone from entering or roaming as they pleased. The killings and the parallels with the Manson murders 6 months earlier put people on edge, said Cumberland County Commissioner Jimmy Keefe, who was 8 at the time and whose father was a special forces soldier. Quote, there was a lot of fear that families weren't safe, Keefe said. Many people bought firearms. Given the recent Manson murders and then the pawn shops were all selling out of rifles and handguns. And so it goes on to talk about the anomalies in the crime scene and in his testimony that you mentioned. Originally, they did, I think the reason his justice was delayed was because the first trial was going to be a military court, and then the Army ended up dropping all the charges against him.
Right. There wasn't enough evidence, or it was all circumstantial in their eyes. And then Mr. Kassav is the one that pursued it with local authorities.
Right. And so it took until...
And a private investigator.
It took until 1975, so 5 years later, for a federal grand jury to indict him.
And I always remember this case because they made a movie out of Fatal Vision. It was a miniseries, actually, that aired, I believe, on CBS in the early 80s. And I remember watching that. I always remember because Andy Griffith is one of my favorite people of all time. And he was in this. He was the private investigator that Mr. Kassav hired. And I just remember Andy Griffith describing for Mr. Kassav, I can't remember the actor that played him, every detail of the crime scene and every detail of how he did it. And just getting broke up to hear Andy Griffith talking about all this gruesome stuff.
Yeah. One of the things here they mentioned, Tracy, was someone had written pig in blood, which is again was a callback to the Manson murders, but they could tell that whoever did it was likely wearing surgical gloves.
Yeah. And his blood type, his blood type was found on, it was either the bathroom or the kitchen sink where he had obviously cut himself, and his cuts were so precision that there was no way it was going to there was any danger of him dying.
Like he knew exactly where to cut himself.
Yeah. He was a surgeon. Of course he knew where to cut himself. He was an Army. He was a trauma surgeon. So, he had, I believe the oldest girl was killed with a blow to the head. And then the others were stabbed. The wife and the youngest daughter were stabbed.
Some of the jurors, when they spoke to Joe McGinnis in the book Fatal Vision, they said that they weren't convinced by the preponderance of evidence entirely until they heard the police interrogate him and that he just did not sound like a man telling the truth. And so I don't have that interrogation, but I do have some footage of him, some archival footage of him on camera. So I just want to show you this man.
Yeah.
Work. And yet the nurses I found is pretty strong on both sides. We don't discuss it, say, at work. And yet the nurses I found are fairly protective of my time and phone calls from non-hospital personnel, phone calls from people who claim they're patients and in fact aren't really patients. I have several sort of protective mechanisms set up that just occurred from friends and business acquaintances, and we don't really discuss the case. But the few times that we have, I judge their reaction to be that they believe in me and they believe the court results in 1970.
Socially, have you run into anyone that has come up and discussed the case with a strong opinion, perhaps against you, or tried to engage you in arguments about the case?
Well, it's usually an uncomfortable situation. It doesn't get acrimonious. In most circumstances, people will sidle up and say that they read Time magazine, or people will say they're aware of what happened in 1970. And for the most part, they usually say they're on my side. And what's the government trying to do? And why has it taken them 7 years to get to the bottom of this? There have been a few very infrequent negative type of experiences with people. It's usually very unpleasant. It leaves you scarred again for weeks at least. It's sort of hard to get back on course for 24 hours or a week or 2 weeks, depending on how the interface occurred.
You've never remarried. I'm wondering if you had not been under the legal proceedings that you've been going through. Do you think your personal life would have been different?
Oh, there's no question. I have to, this is purely
proceeding. They did find new evidence of laboratory analysis of various things from the scene of the crime. And they contended that was the basis for the indictment. No. Hold up just a second. We had a question that just escaped me.
He's so arrogant.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's the number one word that comes to mind. ADL says, what was his motivation? So I think most people agree that his motivation is unknown, that they think he flew into a rage. There was some evidence that one of his daughters had wet the bed, and that there was some kind of argument or fight about that with his wife that triggered. Go ahead.
Yeah, there was that, and then there was evidence that he had been abusing stimulants because he had been working a lot of shifts. And Colette had been wanting to go back to school, and he didn't much want her to. And so I think in the end there was a fight, and kind of like most family annihilators, I think he thought his family wasn't good enough for him and wanted to take them out.
Yes, and I think you're totally right. It was one of those cases of he felt like he had outgrown them. He was abusing supposedly these stimulants. After they were killed, he moved to California and started living this playboy lifestyle, this single bachelor lifestyle, that I think that's what he wanted to do. You know, be seen as this attractive, competent, successful doctor, and I think he felt saddled by his family, and I think he probably had some kind of personality disorder where he felt no remorse or shame in doing this. He's never, all these years later, he still says he didn't do it, and I don't take that as, oh, well, maybe he did it. No, not when you've looked at all the evidence. It's been a while since I read Fatal Vision, but there's no doubt in my mind that this guy killed his family, and yet he won't admit it. It makes me think of Jussie Smollett, who's still doing interviews to this day, saying that these perpetrators yelled, "This is MAGA country"
in Chicago,
right? Like they never admit it. That's the mindset of a psychopath. They just continue to double down, like this narcissistic sort of, if I just say it enough, people will believe me no matter what the evidence says.
It's like Carly Russell, the girl in Birmingham that faked her own kidnapping. I mean, her family's still supporting her and all of this, and she had her reasons. I'm like, people with that mindset that they can do no wrong and everything they do is okay, and they're delusional.
Yeah, it's like a God complex or something.
Yeah.
It
just brought that to mind because she said that her kidnapper was an orange-haired man with a bald spot. So like Trump mixed with Bozo the Clown.
He said, "This is MAGA country." I can't believe it. That's why this stuff is fascinating. By the way, Two Sisters and Some Yarn had to take off, but I saw that she said this earlier. Mystery Chris is just over there thinking, bitches do be crazy.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
It's crazy what some psycho female killers do, and also crazy that all of us women enjoy watching true crime.
Yeah.
As you were
It's
telling
just
that,
fascinating.
As you were telling that Jussie Smollett story, do you remember this? Remind me of this story from, I don't know, 20 years ago, I think, or so, where this white girl, I think she was like a college student, she claimed she was attacked by a black guy, and he like marked or carved the letter B on the side of her face for black, but you can tell like she did it in a mirror, but she got it backwards, and so it didn't make sense why. So it would carve a backwards B like your face. This crazy bitch cut herself.
Also look up the Duke lacrosse case from like
yeah.
the 80s, where it was basically a false flag, and then there was that one that what's his face? Not Ben Crump,
There
Al
she is.
Sharpton. Oh God.
Oh no.
Al Sharpton, Tiana Bradley. That was another one.
Oh man. This has got to be one of the biggest. I don't even remember this. Thank you for telling me about this. She got the B back.
I'm gonna have to look into that. Maybe do a little cow video on that.
She looks like someone who would totally do that to herself.
The call, and then the
Was he
perpetrator. What? Yeah.
I'm sorry. No offense to anybody that might be dyslexic, but that's the first thing that popped into my mind. Well, was he dyslexic?
And then he carved "kill the pigs" in my forehead. It's backwards. Oh my goodness.
He carved God in my forehead, but that's a dog.
Yeah. I just realized your name on the screen, Mr. Chris, is Merstery Chris. Is that on purpose?
I'm gonna say yeah, it was on purpose. No, it wasn't.
John Miller. It was a Puerto Rican man of Puerto Rican height.
It said Mr. E. Chris earlier, and then I tried to change it, but I forgot to get rid of the R. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna keep it.
I like it.
Mr. E or Turi Chris.
My ex was Puerto Rican, and this is like the only man I've ever dated in my life. We were together 10 years, and he was a retired New York City police officer. Puerto Rican now, grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood. But one day we were in the kitchen, and he asked me to hand him the Puerto Rican credit card. And I'm like, what is that? He goes, a knife.
Oh, it took me a second.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my God. And he goes, I was just highly offended. He said, I'm Puerto Rican. I can say that.
Oh, that's so funny. That took me a second. I'm feeling, just so you know, I might have to beg out in a few minutes. My back is killing me for some reason. Maybe I feel like, when you're getting the flu and like your whole body's achy. And my face, I don't know if you can tell, is like flushed. I just feel like I'm coming down with something in real time. I don't know what's happening. Anyway. We'll see. Okay. Wicked Psyched for $10. Thank you so much for the super chat. Says, I'm concerned about the burden of proof increasingly put on the defense, who doesn't have access to the crime scene, only what the prosecution and state collects. Thoughts. Wicked. Go ahead. You take it, Tracy.
No, I was just trying to read it again.
Oh. Well, I'm not. I'm sorry. No, I appreciate the super chat, but I really feel like a lot of these cases, okay, maybe on the grand scheme of things, I could agree with you. But in these high profile cases, I'm not worried about the defense. They have, let's take OJ Simpson, for example. Now I know he had a lot of money. He could hire a very expensive defense, and they got him off successfully, I think, and unjustly. That man was let go. But they did all kinds of manipulative crap. They knew the jury was going to come through his home and take a tour in person of his home. And so his defense team, one of the things they did, his house was covered in posters and photos of scantily clad women, mostly white women, and bikini models and, cheerleaders and stuff. They took down all of his scantily clad white women, and they replaced it with this Afrocentric art of like black families and stuff. Why are you giggling? It's manipulative. So people would come in and be like, oh, what a pillar of the black community, and affect with the like mess with the jury's head.
Yeah. Well, and in my opinion, I mean, it's, beyond a reasonable doubt. So the defense technically has an easier job. They only have to put up one doubt to get a not guilty. But in my opinion, if I was a defense attorney, I would be praying that the prosecution took that stance and withheld some information, because that is a perfect way to get a mistrial or get a conviction overturned. So
Yes.
I'm not really concerned about that. I mean, we're so lucky in this country that it's only that our standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. In lots of countries, their standard is beyond with a preponderance of the evidence, and the defense actually has to prove the case. And they have to prove innocence with the preponderance of the evidence. That's what they do in Russia and a lot of Eastern countries, is preponderance of the evidence. I don't think people realize how easy defendants have it in our system as far as proving their innocence. Not even proving their innocence, deflecting guilt is what I call it, deflecting guilt. They only have to have one reasonable doubt, whereas in a lot of countries, you have to prove your innocence with 51% of the evidence.
Well, here yeah, that's a great point. I'm thinking through what you said, Wicked. I do have one more thing for you though, Wicked Psych. I absolutely agree that some innocent people get convicted. I think we see that even today. The first thing that comes to mind, which has been the news lately, is the Derek Chauvin case, convicted of killing George Floyd, when we now know the autopsy results showed that there was no strangulation, there was nothing to his there was no force to his neck, and it was a drug overdose. And that guy may serve the rest of his life in prison. I definitely think there are innocent people who get convicted. Here's one. There's a movie about a documentary about this woman you can go watch right now. Her name's Christina Boyer. This is a fascinating case because when she was a teenager in the 1980s, after the movie Poltergeist came out, all this local and national news coverage centered around her because her family claimed that she was haunted by a poltergeist. And that you can see here on this newspaper, this is a famous photo that they took of supposedly the phone flying across the room without anyone touching it. And there's all this media coverage of her when she was a teenager about whether or not, psychics came in, different people came in to try, someone came in to try and disprove even that there was a ghost. And they actually caught her on a hidden camera throwing a lamp when she thought no one was watching. So it seemed that she could have been faking all of it. Anyway, that's interesting enough, her background. What happened to her, which is tragic, is that her 3-year-old was killed, and she was convicted of it along with her boyfriend at the time. And she was wrongfully convicted. This woman's still in prison. If you look at the details of the case, it's a simple, there's no way she could have done it because she wasn't at home. She has an alibi. It's corroborated by other people. It's a believable alibi. And yet I think they got wrapped up in, wanting to charge both of them at the same time. And his story against her was enough. But she wasn't there. And so, yes, I do think people wrongfully convict sometimes. Of course, that's possible. But in a lot of cases, I think we are hesitant sometimes. Their jury is hesitant to convict because they've become so addicted, like I mentioned before, to these true crime shows where they don't understand even what you're talking about, Tracy, with the concept of reasonable doubt. They think that means there must be no doubts whatsoever. That's not what that means.
No, one reasonable doubt's all it takes. And for example, and this whole issue of wrongfully convicted has gotten so abused over the last few years. You see things like the Innocence Project, which they are scam artists to the level of BLM. And I'm not talking about the organization BLM, not, they've gotten people off that are obviously guilty just on politics. And so this whole concept gets abused. Just huge. Number one, the Central Park 5 obviously did it, but got off. And there's others. I did a whole series on the murder of Paul Howell. Julius Jones was getting the same, his murder. was getting pretty much the same treatment. And is because, you know, some activists with Innocence Project got together. They made a documentary narrated by Viola Davis, and that was all it took to
That's all it took.
Yeah.
Yes. This pisses me off, Tracy. Did you fall? That happened with this guy, Adnan Syed.
Oh, he did. Oh, he so did it.
He so did it. So, yeah, and all it took was a popular podcast, and
yeah,
the evidence is there where his phone was at the time of the murders. Like, there's no, this to me, there is no reasonable doubt in this case that this guy did it.
And the prosecutor that let him go, she did it as an FU to the people of Baltimore who had voted her out. That was the only reason she did it, as a big old FU.
I've done a whole separate video on him before, so I'm not going to go into that one now. But Adnan Syed, guilty as an MFer, and that one bothers me.
Right before I came on here, I was doing a show with my good friend Roberta Glass at Roberta Glass True Crime Report.
I know Roberta Glass. I've talked to her.
Yeah, she mentioned you. She said to tell you hi. And she is if you love good in-depth coverage, I mean, deeply scientific coverage. She meets with the prosecutors, the defense attorneys. She has a whole series of videos on the Innocence Project and all the bad stuff they have done and getting obviously guilty people off. If you're interested in that topic, definitely check her out.
Yes, Roberta Glass. Everybody go and check her out. I want to have her on the show at some point. We haven't talked in a while, but she did interview me for her channel, and we talked a little bit about the West Memphis 3, which she's covered extensively as well. And she did a lot on the Adnan Syed case.
I have so many mixed feelings about the West Memphis 3. I go back and forth. And forth. I don't know who to believe.
Tracy, do you know that okay, so when I was working in the comedy world, one of the comedians I worked with took a great interest in the West Memphis 3 case and started corresponding with Damien Eccles when he was in prison. And so I transcribed his first book for him. Did you know this?
Roberta had mentioned that, but I know I did not.
It's so, weird. It's called Almost Home. We should do a whole separate episode on this. But I had these out from back when I was talking with her. These are like his letters and stuff with the book and other things inside of them. Before they did the Alfred plea and were released. I fully believed in his innocence at the time. I'm not so convinced anymore now that I've seen how some of these people have gotten off.
Yeah, I don't know. I do know what the police did to the third boy, the one that was mentally slow.
Jesse Miss Kelly.
Yeah, just I believe what they did to him was very, very wrong. If I'm inclined to believe innocent on any of those, I would believe that he's the innocent one. I think he was led. Now the other two, I don't know. I don't know about Damien, and I go back and forth.
I go back and forth too. Yeah.
And
Ruby
we're forgetting
says
about those 3 little boys that lost their lives.
Yeah, and it became this huge, sensation with so many artists and musicians and actors involved in award-winning movies. And now, of course, he has another much more popular book out once he got out of prison and got a book deal. But that one is just I'm not sure. A lot of these, you'll see you and I both have a very strong opinions on them. It's this guy, Adnan Syed, totally guilty. But with that one, I'm like you. I'm sort of, I don't really know what to think. You guys, we've got a lot queued up, but it's already been 2.5 hours, and I apologize. I think I'm coming down with something, and my back is killing me, and I just need to go lie down. Is that okay?
No. How dare you know? Of course it is.
I don't know what's happening. Maybe it was hanging out outside last night for the trick-or-treaters.
All those filthy children that gave you germs.
Yeah.
You gave them candy, they gave you germs.
Oh.
That's what you get for being nice.
You guys, thank you for tuning in and hanging out with us tonight and having a great trip down the dark true crime alley again. I promise it'll be a while before we ever do a part 3 because Mystery Chris is like, no more true crime. I'm kidding. I appreciate you being so patient with us ladies, Mystery Chris, as we talk about some of this stuff.
It's all right. We're going to talk about Star Trek, so
We are
it'll
definitely
happen.
doing Star Trek. Tracy, why don't you tell people where they can find your channel?
Oh, you can find me here on YouTube at Keto and Crime, spelled with 2 Ks, Keto and Crime. And from there, you can link to my Facebook, my Twitter, my Rumble, my Odyssey, all of that good stuff.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. I always love talking to you.
Oh, I love hanging out with you guys. You're like some of my best friends, and I mean that.
It's so easy to hang out with you. It's, yeah. I forget there's people who are doing a show sometimes.
I know. We're just chatting, and everybody else is just here in the room.
Like, look at this video. No, he's so guilty.
That's why I'm not wearing any pants right now.
No. You guys, thanks for joining us here at Deprogrammed. If you like the show, please consider hitting like or leaving a comment. That helps us with the algorithm. And if you want to support us, you can do so at Subscribestar Locals, Patreon, or here at YouTube. And hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday and a great rest of your week. We will see you on Friday for a kerfuffle break at 1:00. Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.